Pulled into Tech Garage today, and the Sable's sitting here in the parking lot with a note. Looks like my wife's friend Chris went out from the grocery store and her car wouldn't start. Takes 3 things for a car to run: spark, fuel, and compression. Let's see what this one sounds like. Well, it sounds like it has compression, so we're gonna have to chase spark and fuel. And you can watch us make Sable able today on Tech Garage. Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. Now, our family sedan won't start. Let's clarify: won't crank and won't start. Crank, I'm thinking batteries, starters, alternators, nothing going on. Start, on the other hand, nothing happened. And that's what's going on here, Brian. That's a problem.
Absolutely no fun. It's happened to all of us, but you know, it could be so many different things. So we're going to follow a few diagnostic steps here and do them really right to make sure we understand exactly what's wrong.
Well, it looks like you're underway. You got it under control. I'm going to head over and set up a demo so you can see how a fuel system actually works.
Well, step one is to determine, do we have spark? That can be done with any type of spark tester. This one makes it very, very simple. Chase is kind enough to be in the cab and help us out here. We get connection on any one of the spark plug boots. Right here, we get a good ground connection. Make sure you got your safety goggles on. And Chase, go ahead and crank it up and let's see if we've got spark. Well, there's good spark. You can see the fire jumping across right there. So I can assume we've got spark going to all cylinders. I'm going to reconnect this. And the next step is to check for fuel pressure. Now, a couple tips and tricks along the way. Make sure that's seated. Many of today's vehicles have a Schrader valve on the fuel rail. Now, there's also a check valve down at the fuel pump, which means inside this fuel rail, there's always pressure, right around 40 psi. So with a Schrader valve exposed, it looks just like a tire pressure valve if you haven't seen them before. You can take a screwdriver, anything, and push in on the valve, and you ought to see fuel come out of that system because, again, there's pressure in there. So when I push in, I've got nothing. It's not burping any fuel out. It's not seeping anything out at all. That's a hint. I think we've got a fuel delivery or fuel pressure problem. We're going to check that formally here in just a few minutes. Now, another way to check it is the way the professionals do, a proper fuel pressure gauge. Very simple how it connects onto the Schrader valve. Make sure you've got a good connection that's seated properly. That's really important. The pressure connector clicks on, and we're good. And once again, everything's clear. When Chase cranks it, we ought to see fuel pressure right here on the gauge. Go ahead and try it, Chase. We've got nothing. We've got no fuel pressure at all. And he cranked it long enough that that pump would have recovered and fuel would have come up to the rail, and we should see some pressure here. Now, I think we've got a fuel pressure problem. We've talked about that. For you driveway kind of DIYers out there that don't have the fancy fuel pressure gauge, there's another test you can do. Again, do this safely, but think intake manifold, think intake, air intake here. There's plenty of places for you to plug in. We're not getting fuel up to there, but I want to see if this vehicle wants to run. We think we have enough air, we think we have enough spark, but what about fuel? So throttle body cleaner, carbon choke cleaner, anything like that, spray it in for a couple seconds, get a charge in there. We'll have Chase crank it and see if the vehicle will run. 1, 2, 3, that should be enough. Seal it back up. Chase, go ahead and try it. Let's see if it runs. There you go. This vehicle wants to run. So clearly, we've now defined that we've got fuel delivery, fuel pressure problem that we've got to solve. So one more step along the way to check it out and see what's wrong. But John, he's going to explain exactly how this whole fuel system works.
Now, the fuel pump over in our Sable is real similar to this one right here. You can see the fuel pump located down here in the fuel tank. That's where it is, inside of the fuel tank. Then what happens is you come up here with a fuel line that comes to a fuel rail. Now, our fuel rail returns back to the tank. But see, on the exit of the fuel rail, you have a fuel pressure regulator. Why do you have a fuel pressure regulator? Well, if you're at idle, you don't need much fuel. 90% of it's going to return down to the tank. If you're at wide open throttle, it's going to close, it's going to back up fuel pressure, and you're going to get more fuel pressure when you need it. Now, once I have fuel pressure here, it's going to come up here, it's going to go through the lines, through the injector, into your engine. I can turn it on. You can see it actually pumping, and 90% of it's just returning right here because I don't have the injector on, so it's going to return. That helps stop vapor lock on your cars. You guys probably remember back in the carburation days, you may have a fuel pump that looks like this, bolts to the side of your block, 3 to 5 psi of pressure. This one here looks identical, but be careful. This could be a throttle body injection. It could be anywhere from 13 to 15 psi. Our fuel injection system's pushing anywhere from 45 to 50. Well, we got one test left, and we got to make sure we have voltage down at the pump. I think Brian's got it done.
Remember, we had no pressure at the fuel rail, so the final step is to see if we've got electrical power coming back here to the fuel pump. So I've located the hot wire coming to the fuel pump. I'm going to use a positive lead to connect to with the DVOM. And Chase, when he turns it over, we ought to see close to 12 volts coming here on our meter. Chase, go ahead and crank it. Well, we've got 12 volts coming back here. We need to replace the fuel pump. We're going to do that when we come back. So stay tuned for more Tech Garage presented by Advanced Auto Parts.